and then they have to be cut. Then they have to be polished by craftsmen to get what we normally see in jewelry. They didn't just appear. Clothing doesn't just appear. Material has to be harvested or created and woven into fabric, which is further colored, cut, shaped, sewn into the garments that we just pick up in the store. Clothes don't just appear. Jewelry doesn't just appear. Raw metals have to be mined and melted and purified in heat hotter than the hinges of hell, and then pulled and twisted and cut and shaped into the pieces of artwork that we adorn. These processes are put into place for a reason. They involve extremes, and frequently they're anything but pretty. Joseph's process was not pretty. Beloved son to slave, from slave to prisoner, and from prison to the palace. But keep in mind that everyone's process is uniquely designed for them. So even if your process kind of resembles somebody else's, you will go through the process differently. God has designed your process to get exactly what he needs to get out of you. And there is struggle within your process, but even that is uniquely yours. Where I struggle, you might not, and where you struggle, I might be okay. But God has even designed your struggle to fit your purpose and your outcome. There's a story once about a little boy who was playing outside, and he found a strange-looking caterpillar, so he brought it into his mother and asked could he keep it. She said, only if you take care of it. So he got a big jar and put leaves and a stick in it, and he watched it every day and made sure there was water. And one day the caterpillar was acting weird on the stick. So he goes and gets his mother, and he's like, I don't know what's happening. The mother explains to him that the caterpillar is spinning a cocoon, that the caterpillar's going to go through a process called metamorphosis. It's going to become a beautiful butterfly. So he's excited. So every day he's watching and waiting for this cocoon to open up, for this butterfly to come out. One day, it happened. He looks and he sees a little movement in the cocoon, and he sees this little tiny hole start to emerge. So he sees the butterfly's head start to come out of the hole, but hours and hours go by, and the butterfly still seems to be stuck in that position. So he gets nervous. He thinks the butterfly is stuck, so he decides, I'm going to help it. So he goes and gets a pair of scissors, and he walked back, and he snipped the cocoon to make the hole just a little bit bigger, and the butterfly quickly came out. But when the butterfly came out, it wasn't what the boy was thinking, because instead of these big, beautiful wings, the wings were shriveled and wrinkled, and the body was swollen, and the butterfly could barely walk. So he knew that in time the body would shrink and the wings would expand, but it never happened. The butterfly limped around like that for like a day or two and then just died. It never was able to fly. So the boy tried to figure out what he had done wrong. So his mother took him to talk to a science teacher, and he learned from the teacher that the butterfly was supposed to go through that struggle. In fact, in this struggle to push his way through that hole, the hole pushed the fluid from the body into the wings. Because without the struggle, the butterfly would never, ever fly. So the boy meant well, but his good intentions actually hurt the butterfly. And the butterfly's life was shortened because without that struggle, it was never able to achieve its real purpose. That fluid that swelled the butterfly's body was not healthy for the butterfly. It was fine while the butterfly was developing, but it was not meant to stay there. And what things or people do we keep in our lives way past their time to go that end up hindering our purpose and becoming toxic to us? Remember that struggling is an important part of any growth experience. In fact, it's the struggle that develops your ability to fly. And the process will not be pretty. But you can't get the full desired result if the struggle is removed from the process. And even though the processes may not be pretty, the end result is always beautiful. We won't understand what's happening and why, and you have to just rely that it's God's process. Because if his family had not plotted to kill him, Joseph would most likely have never ended up in Egypt. And even if he was, he wouldn't have been able to make the connections that he did, given Hebrew in Egypt relations at that time. But being pushed to his lowest landed him in the house of someone in authority. Someone who later should have had him killed, but chose to spare his life and imprison him instead. Again, at his lowest point, he was able to showcase God's gifts to him, which ultimately enabled him to not only save his family, but millions of others. And he is actually credited with the system of grain storage that they used for centuries in Egypt. But if he stayed home, he most likely would never even have really worked or gotten a chance to use his resourcefulness and his creativity, because remember, his family were shepherds. And that coat that Jacob gave Joseph that started this whole drama in the first place was described as being very long with very long flowing sleeves. But shepherds were known for wearing short garments with short sleeves to keep them safe during work. It's keeping them from tripping over themselves or something else, or getting caught on something, or becoming unnecessarily dirty. So clearly Jacob never intended for Joseph to have to work like the rest of his brothers. What a waste of a brilliant strategical mind that would have been, but for God's process. Joseph went from being a selfish brat, concerned only for himself, to being concerned for nations. It was a process that Joseph went through. It wasn't a comeback, because at the time that he was reunited with his brothers, it's safe to say at least about 8 years had passed, because remember, after he became ruler under Pharaoh, there were 7 good years, followed by the famine. And the brothers didn't come seeking Joseph until the famine had wiped out all of their resources. So Joseph had been in a good place, ruling for about at least 8 years. He'd been there for a while. His success and even him being alive were news to his family, but he'd been serving in his purpose for years. To his shocked family, though, it was like as if he had come back from the dead, because his brothers did not expect Joseph's pampered behind to survive slavery. Just like Glenn with Denise, they never imagined themselves on their knees, bowing at the feet of the one that they plotted against initially. And frequently, your divine process is going to look like a comeback to those that plotted against you, because they left you to be destroyed. They thought that they had control over your outcome, but they were just pawns in God's perfect plan. And Joseph got a little additional bonus too, because see, sometimes we don't get the satisfaction of having to see those that try to destroy us have to stand in awe, watching how we've prospered, and have to admit their guilt and defeat. We don't always get to see those who denied us or try to block us come back to us asking for our help. Frequently, God won't give us that blessing because, well, like me, we may not be mature enough to receive that. Maybe we would gloat or take this opportunity to exact revenge. Now, Joseph did get a little bit of revenge in, with the false accusation and the planting the contraband and scaring his brothers half to death, but ultimately he forgave them. He did not let them off without making sure that they knew that he knew what their intentions really were. But he had come to realize that the movement of God was in the midst of that mess, and he was thankful for how it all turned out. And maybe you're relating to Joseph and the beautiful results from that process because you know of people who have tried to hurt you and who have left you to your own demise and destruction. But to be honest, like me, though I'm not proud of it, I know good and well that some parts of my history lines up more with his brothers. Hatching petty schemes, heaping hate upon dreamers, and maybe even I've left some people devastated, not caring about whether or not they ever recover. The good news is that even if you did something that you meant for evil, you can be blessed by your victim's process. Because see, Joseph's brothers did not end up starving to death. God blessed their victim, Joseph, so bountifully that it spilled over onto those that were trying to have him eliminated. Because God does not let evil triumph, even when it might look like it is won. Because God will forever have the eternal victory, because there is purpose in God's process. Process, not a comeback, because it only seems like a comeback to those who don't understand the process. Those who are not aware they're being used, and to those who left you for dead, the process may not be pretty, but the end result is beautiful. So what are we supposed to be doing while we're in the process? We're supposed to be waiting in joyful anticipation of the ending. We are God's children, so we're not supposed to fret and mourn like those that don't know him. Because if that was the case, what makes us different from anybody else? We're supposed to stay in godly character, keep in communication with God, perform our duties and responsibilities with excellence, and then be excited about the deliverance that we know is coming. Because we're going to be able to live in and through the process with an expectation of deliverance. Are you living with your expectation of deliverance? Amen.
Amen.